Above the law? No one is above the law, not even the richest or most powerful individuals. The CEO acted as if he was above the law, ignoring regulations and company policies. Believing you are above the law can lead to serious legal consequences. Against all odds. Against all odds, the team won the championship, proving everyone wrong. She recovered from the illness against all odds and went back to lead a normal life. The explorer survived in the desert against all odds. Against one's better judgment. He invested in the scheme against his better judgment and ended up regretting it. Against her better judgment, she decided to trust him one more time. I went out in the storm against my better judgment, and it was indeed a bad idea. Against one's will. The contract was signed against his will, under a lot of pressure from his co-workers. Nobody should be forced to work against their will. She felt that the new policy was being implemented against her will. Against the backdrop of. The peace treaty was signed against the backdrop of increasing international tension. The festival took place against the backdrop of the beautiful mountain scenery. The negotiations for a new trade agreement are happening against the backdrop of a global economic downturn. Against the clock. The team is working against the clock to finish the project on time. With the deadline approaching, she found herself racing against the clock. The doctors were fighting against the clock to save the patient's life. Against the grain. It goes against the grain to accept such unfair policies without complaint. Painting this room black really goes against the grain of traditional interior design. He always does things against the grain and never follows the crowd. Against the tide. The new senator is swimming against the tide with her progressive policies. Trying to promote environmental awareness in a society fixated on consumption of goods is like swimming against the tide. The old man stood against the tide of change that was sweeping through his village and refused to have heating system installed. Ahead of time. Please have the reports completed ahead of time for the next meeting. She always arrives ahead of time to prepare for her presentations. Knowing ahead of time that the road would be closed allowed us to plan a detour. As a last resort. If negotiations fail, we may have to consider litigation as a last resort. I don't like taking any medication, so I only use it as a last resort. Calling for a vote was used as a last resort when the committee couldn't come to an agreement. As a matter of fact, I have already completed the task you're about to assign. He seems quiet, but as a matter of fact, he's very talkative once you get to know him. As a matter of fact, the data shows we have improved our sales by 20% this quarter. As a result, the project was successful and, as a result, we secured additional funding. He worked very hard and as a result was promoted at the end of the year. There was a power outage, and as a result, the whole neighborhood was in darkness. As a rule of thumb, I always check the oil level in my car before a long trip. As a rule of thumb, you should drink 8 glasses of water a day for proper hydration. Coffee and tea are not included. In gardening, as a rule of thumb, it's best to water plants early in the morning, before the sunlight becomes too aggressive. As for me, everyone may be scared of the new project, but as for me, I'm quite excited. Some travel by train, but as for me, I always choose to fly. The team may have their doubts, but as for me, I am confident we will succeed. As clear as mud. The instructions were as clear as mud. I had no idea what to do next. His explanation was as clear as mud, leaving everyone even more confused. The legal language in the contract is as clear as mud to those not familiar with such documents. As far as I'm concerned, we have finished the unproductive discussion on this topic. She may continue arguing, but as far as I'm concerned, the matter is closed. As far as I'm concerned, you can do whatever you like this weekend. As good as gold. The children were as good as gold during the long wedding ceremony. He's been as good as gold ever since he promised to change his behavior. My dog is always as good as gold when we have visitors over. As good as new. After the repairs, my bike was as good as new. She cleaned the second-hand dress and it looked as good as new. The refurbished laptop works as good as new, and I saved a lot of money. As it were. The company is now back on its feet, as it were, after last year's financial troubles. He's become, as it were, a different person since he moved abroad. The city has recaptured its former glory, as it were, with the restoration of historic buildings. As luck would have it, we arrived at the station just as our train was pulling in. As luck would have it, I lost a $20 bill when I was at the rally. As luck would have it, she called me just as I was thinking about her. As of now, the meeting is still scheduled for 3 p.m. As of now, we have not received any official confirmation. As of now, the project is on track and within budget, so we are doing great. As opposed to, we use fresh ingredients, as opposed to the processed foods our competitors offer. He prefers to solve problems with diplomacy, as opposed to force. I would rather spend my vacation in the countryside, as opposed to the crowded city. As per usual. She walked in late, as per usual, without any excuse. As per usual, the meeting started with a long and tedious introduction. He forgot to bring his biology textbook to class, as per usual. As plain as the nose on your face. The evidence was as plain as the nose on your face, and yet the jury was still unconvinced. Her dislike for the plan was as plain as the nose on your face, she didn't have to say a word. It's as plain as the nose on your face that he's in love. As push comes to shove. As push comes to shove, we will have to prioritize some projects over others. She is not very social, but as push comes to shove, she can be quite persuasive. We all prefer a peaceful resolution, but as push comes to shove, we are prepared to defend our rights. As usual. He's late and unprepared for class, as usual. Dinner will be ready at 6 p.m., as usual. The traffic was terrible on the way home, as usual. As we know it. Climate change is threatening life as we know it on the planet. Technology is rapidly changing work as we know it. The Internet has revolutionized communication as we know it. As we speak. Rescue operations are underway as we speak. Our team is working on the issue as we speak. The parade is starting as we speak. At a crossroads. She's at a crossroads in her career and has to decide which path to take. Our country is at a crossroads, and the next election will determine our future direction. The company is at a crossroads between expanding overseas or consolidating its domestic market position. At a glance. You can see the quality of the fabric at a glance. The solution seemed obvious at a glance, but actually required much more thought. The expert could tell at a glance that the signature was fake. At a loose end. After finishing the project, she found herself at a loose end. He's been at a loose end since he retired. At weekends, I prefer not to be at a loose end, I like to have plans. At a loss. When asked about the plans, the manager was at a loss. I'm at a loss for how to solve the issue of juvenile delinquency. She was at a loss when she saw the chaos in the kitchen. At a moment's notice. The nature of his job meant he had to be ready to travel at a moment's notice. Emergency services have to be prepared to respond at a moment's notice. She packed a bag so she could leave at a moment's notice if the situation got any worse. At a premium. In a crowded city, space is always at a premium. With so many people of all ages wanting the new model of iPhone, it was selling at a premium. Tickets to the final match are at a premium, they're almost impossible to find. At a snail's pace. Traffic was moving at a snail's pace because of the heavy snow. He walks at a snail's pace, so we're always late. The project was progressing at a snail's pace, which frustrated everyone involved. At a standstill. During the strike, production was at a standstill. The city was at a standstill as everyone stopped to watch the parade. Negotiations are at a standstill, neither side will budge. At all costs. They were determined to protect their family at all costs. You should avoid making such mistakes at all costs. The company is striving to maintain its reputation at all costs. At arm's length. He keeps his competitors at arm's length to avoid conflicts. It's best to keep those rumors at arm's length and not get involved. She holds strangers at arm's length until she gets to know them better. At close range. The photographer took pictures of the birds at close range. It's dangerous to use fireworks at close range. Most soldiers are well trained to shoot at close range. At ease. The graduate finally felt fully at ease after the exams were over. The friendly atmosphere at the party put everyone at ease. A good leader should be able to put a nervous team at ease. At face value. Bear in mind that you can't always take news stories at face value. She took his comments on her appearance at face value and got offended. It's risky to accept these promises at face value without further investigation. At first glance. At first glance, the first exam task came across as complex, but it turned out to be relatively easy in the end. The painting looks plain at first glance, but if you look closer, you'll see amazing details. At first glance, I thought I knew that man, but I was mistaken. At hand. Keep your phone at hand in case we need to contact you. I always keep a dictionary at hand while reading a novel in English. Remember to make sure you have all the necessary tools at hand before you start the repair. At last. After hours of waiting, the doctor finally saw her at last. We finished the project at last. It took longer than we expected. At last, the silence was broken by the sound of music. At least. You should drink at least 8 glasses of water a day. At least you tried, which is more than most people can say. If we can't meet in person, let's at least talk on the phone. At loggerheads. The two departments were at loggerheads over the budget. They have been at loggerheads since the disagreement at the meeting. The negotiations failed because the parties were at loggerheads. At most. The meeting should take at most 2 hours. I have at most $5 in my wallet right now. You can stay at most until 10 o'clock. At odds. The two politicians have been at odds for years. They're often at odds about how to raise their children. Teachers and students are usually at odds over setting homework. At odds with. Her cheerful mood was at odds with the somber atmosphere. The bright decor is at odds with the traditional exterior of the house. The witness's statement is at odds with what the security cameras recorded. At one's beck and call. I'm not going to be at his beck and call all weekend. As an assistant, he is used to being at someone's beck and call. She has a team of professionals at her beck and call.